Hi and welcome or welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. Please ignore that the lighting on this video is not great and it's cozy. It's okay, it's cozy lighting. I am here with my April wrap-up. Yes, are we halfway through May? We are. And we're still gonna do this. Yes, I am. I only have like 4 books to talk about, so it's not going to take us that long. I have not been reading as much recently, but I am getting back into it now, so hopefully May's wrap-up will be a lot bigger, and June's wrap-up should be a lot bigger because that's when me and Courtney are going on our annual reading holiday, so I'm very excited for that next month. And I am doing really well on my reading in May in comparison to the past few months. But yeah, April was a weird month again, so I read 4 books, which I am getting back into it, so I am not, like, I'm okay with it being such a low number because that's just what life is like at the moment. So, it has been the past few months. So anyway, the first book that I have to talk about is Hold Still by Nina LaCour, which, if you know anything about Nina LaCour's work, it's really emotional. And this might be an odd one to pick up when I was going through an emotional time in my life anyway. However, I really wanted a book that would make me feel like I was really involved in the story, and I know that Nina LaCour does that for me. I know that I really want to pick up her books when I read them, and that is why I decided to pick this up, because I knew that once I picked it up I wouldn't want to put it down. So that's why I picked this up, and I really, really enjoyed it. It's following someone called Caitlin, and her best friend Ingrid has just committed suicide, and she is very unsure of like her life and what her life looks like without her best friend. And then she finds that Ingrid left her like journal, like scrapbook journal type thing for her, and it's basically about her like reading that, and also about her relationship with her parents and her family and other people in her life at school, and new friends that she's discovering, and how she kind of moves on from this friendship that she had with Ingrid. It is very emotional, but it's also very compelling, and I just really like how Nina LaCour does this like slice of life when there's often something more going on and something like much bigger behind the scenes. And I just really liked it. I really liked the emotion and the relationships and the friendships and finding out more about Ingrid's life. And it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and there is an author's like letter at the back of this as well that gives more like context to this story that also made me really emotional. So I am really glad that I picked this up, and I'm glad that I predicted this is exactly what I needed when I needed it. I was going through a really stressful time at work in April as well. It was just a really big month, and we had big projects that I was working quite heavily on, but I remember one of the only lunch breaks I had, I read some of this. But yeah, I found myself being really enveloped in the story, which is exactly what I needed at the time. So I'm glad that I predicted that correctly. I did give this one 5 out of 5 stars. And the next one I read was The Ghost Theatre by Matt Osman, which I borrowed, so I will put a photo of the cover here. And can I actually tell you anything about this book without looking it up? Probably not, because none of it has stayed in my head. So let's find some more information about this book. So the synopsis says, on a rooftop in Elizabethan London, 2 worlds collide. Shay is a messenger girl and trainer of hawks who sees the future in the patterns of birds. Nonsuch is the dark star of the city's fabled child theatre scene, as famous as royalty yet lowly as a beggar. Together they create the Ghost Theatre, a troupe staging magical plays in London's hidden corners. As their hallucinatory performances incite rebellion amongst the city's outcasts, the pair's relationship sparks and burns against a backdrop of the plague and a London in flames. Their growing fame sweeps them up into the black web of the Elizabethan court, where Shay and Nonsuch discover that if they fly too high, a fall is sure to come. That was really difficult to read. I borrowed this one, but also I read a lot of it on audio in the end, because I read the first like 50 pages of this physically, actually possibly preferred it physically, but when I started listening to the audiobook, my brain switched off. I was not bothered about this book. Found it very difficult to get into both physically and on audio. I found it very confusing. I didn't really get what was going on with the characters. I was not following it at all. None of it stayed in my head, even like mere weeks later. And I only read this because of a book club that I did not attend in the end because I was so busy with work that I couldn't go, but I wouldn't have read it otherwise. Maybe wouldn't have finished it if I hadn't bought the audiobook by that point to try and finish it for the book club that I didn't have time to go to. This was not great in my opinion. 2 stars. The next one I picked up was The Lifeline by Libby Page, and this one is actually a follow-on story from The Lido by Libby Page, which I read back in 2020 and I absolutely loved. It was like one of my favourite books of that year. I really, really adored it, and I remember feeling so like compelled to read that story and like stayed up late to finish it and stuff, and it made me cry, it made me really emotional. And this is following the same characters much later on in their lives, or like a few years later on in their lives. So The Lido is following Kate, pretty sure she's called, yes, is following Kate, who's a journalist for like a local newspaper in London. This is the first book I'm talking about, so it's set in London and it's following her as she starts this story about a local Lido and then gets involved in like the lives of the people there. She starts swimming again herself. It becomes like a really important place to her, and it also follows her own relationships and friendships in her life, and this one is following her a while later, when she has gotten married and she's having a child and she's just had the baby. It's also following Phoebe, who's a mental health nurse and going through some of her own stuff as well, and they kind of come together through swimming. I really love the Lido so much, and it was lovely to be back in these, well, in Kate's life, as she's much further on in her life and like has a much different, very different life than she did in the Lido, but also be introduced to Phoebe and some other characters too. I really liked that, and I also know from following Libby Page online how much of this, the story in here and the really important messages this one discusses, are prevalent in her life, and I know that she's gone through a lot with her pregnancy and childbirth and those early stages of her son's childhood. I know that there's a lot that she's spoken about online that's reflected in here as well, and I feel like it meant a lot to read that in the story, knowing what Libby's gone through herself, and that a lot of the conversations in here are probably conversations that Libby actually had as well when her son was really young. So this one is emotional and does cover some difficult themes, so do look up those if you're going to read it, but I would really recommend this this series and this author. I do really like her books. I would give this one maybe 4.5 stars. The Lido was like 5 stars for me, and I don't think anything else by Libby Page will live up to that because it was the first one I read, but I did still really like this, and I really liked being back with these characters, and I really liked the theme of like the swimming, the wild swimming in here. And the last one I have to talk about is A Thousand Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. I'm actually now listening to the third and final book in this trilogy, so I've listened to all of these on audio. I really like the audiobooks for them. These are quite typical dystopian of this era, if that makes sense. They're from like 2015, I want to say, and I am really enjoying it, but I do feel like it's, so 2014 this one, I do feel like it has that kind of tone of a mid-2010s YA dystopian, that I don't feel like it's, I feel like it could have been something really special, and yet there's probably other books out there that are quite similar in a way, like The Next Together by Lauren James, for example. But I do really like the premise of this. It's following Marguerite, who is the daughter of 2 scientists. They are physicists, and they are trying to prove the existence of multiple dimensions within their work, and they do that, and then her father is murdered, and she chases this person through like multiple dimensions with the help of another physics student who is one of her parents' graduate students. So she's determined to avenge the person who murdered her father, but then she kind of like goes through these different dimensions and finds out new things, and it's kind of following on from there. There's a romance in here, which I have enjoyed, but it's also quite typical of that era as well. I feel like now on the third book it's getting a bit ridiculous. I'm very near the end. I've literally got like 15 minutes to read, to like listen to, and I feel like it has gotten quite ridiculous. I have still enjoyed it, but it's one of those that it's like, oh, this probably couldn't go on for much longer because some of the stuff that's happening in here is like wild now. But I am enjoying it, and I will talk more about the second and third book in my May wrap up. So I've already read 2 books this month. Well, actually more than that, maybe 3 books this month. 2. And I have really enjoyed the series overall. I'm glad that I finally read it because this one has been on my TBR for a very, very long time. So that one, what am I giving it? I gave the first one 4 stars. So that one was 4 stars. It was a good start to this like dystopian series. Anyway, short but sweet video. I did want to talk about the books I read in April and get back into doing like wrap-ups and stuff. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing about those, and thank you for watching and being a part of my videos, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.